welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today's tutorial is going to be for this Llama Piñata greeting card with a bit of a twist. As you'll see, the inside has a spinner in it. The technique for the spinner card I cannot take credit for. I did see it through a Jennifer McGuire tutorial on YouTube, but I will be showing you how to assemble and create the SVG file pack from my Etsy store. So as you can see here, I've actually cut out the color blocking portion of the cut file 3 times. For the inner spinner portion, I need a front and a back, so I've cut it twice, and then I wanted to create a detail on the front of the card, so I've cut it once. There is also a solid piece, which these color blocks are going to attach to, and again, I've cut out 2 of those because we need a front and a back for the interior spinner. I've just used a white because a little bit of it might show through. You could use one of the other colors to kind of camouflage it a little bit better, but I wanted to be able to show you the contrast on video. So the first thing I'm going to do once I have all my pieces cut is actually take my scissors and just grab each piece individually, and along the bottom layer, cut a little bit of a fringe. I could have added these into the design file. However, the pieces are so small and the cuts would have been so small, I feel like we would have gotten a lot of tearing and fraying and uneven cuts had we done this on a Cricut or a cutting machine. And it's pretty easy to do by hand. So I'm just cutting in little slits about 3/4 of the way through this strip, each strip, in order to kind of create a fringe and add a little bit more dimension to each piece. And again, this does take a little bit of time, but I think we get a much better result by doing it by hand rather than using the Cricut machine to cut it. So I'm going to just show you how I did it the first time, and then I'm going to speed it up and show you once I've gotten all 3 sets completed. And we're back. So I've fully cut the fringe on 2 of my sets, and these are going to be the sets that I use for the interior spinner of the card. And so all I'm going to do is now take a little bit of my tacky glue. You can use kind of any glue you want. I wouldn't suggest a double-sided tape just because, again, these pieces are so small. I'm just going to apply a little bit, and I'm only going to apply it to the top quarter of each piece, sort of right up to where the bottom or the end of my cuts were for that fringe. And then I'm just actually gluing these right on exactly where they go. Little bit tedious, but it makes a really cool effect in the end. So just, again, a little bit of glue, and I'm going to be adding them on one by one. And I like to start from the bottom and go upwards towards the top, because then I can create a nice kind of a little bit of an overlap between each piece that really makes it look layered and textured. So going in with my next layer, applying just a little bit of glue and placing that on, following the outline of the solid piece and just slightly overlapping it from the bottom piece. The SVG file will have the layered strips a little bit larger than the solid piece, so it does allow for a little bit of overlap between each stripe of color. And again, the colors, you could totally pick whatever colors you wanted to. And I'm now realizing that I glued the wrong side of this piece, so just keep that in mind when you're going and doing this. Not a big deal because I can grab one from my other side. So again, just double check that you're putting glue on the right side before you get it done. Again, since I'm only working on my first one, this isn't so big a deal, but I can definitely see how this might have been a problem had I not realized it a little bit sooner. So I'm just doing some adjusting. Of course, you can't see what I'm doing because I didn't quite pay attention to where my hands were, but again, I'm going to double check that I have this on in the right direction so that I am applying the glue on the right side. And again, just a thin strip at the top and sticking it down just slightly overlapped. And I'm just going to follow the exact same process for each piece for both sides of my spinner. And don't worry too much if you're not lined up exactly. You can cut off a little bit of the excess afterwards. And this is what your one side is going to look like when it's totally finished. So I'm going to skip ahead to getting both of them done. So we now have both done. You can see that little bit of fringe on them. And what I'm going to do is use my tweezers here to kind of pull up that fringe just a little bit to make it a little bit more defined and a little bit more 3D. I like to do this once the glue is thoroughly dry. That way I'm not going to peel off the whole strip and that I can see that it's not going to come off or go anywhere. So I'm doing this to both sides of my spinner. You can do it sort of the whole length or just little pieces. I just did a couple pieces here and there to kind of create some dimension. So now I'm going in and taking those pieces again and basically just lining up my strips on a white circle as a bit of an added element to the front of my card. And as you can see here, I started with that blue strip. That's just because I wanted to be able to make sure I had the placement correct. You could, by all means, cut another solid piece and then glue that on the front, but I wasn't thinking when I cut these out and lost my circle or lost the solid piece somewhere. So by all means, cut a third solid piece and assemble those, or you can eyeball it the way I did and just glue them directly onto your circle. You also don't have to make this piece, but I like to use up all the little bits of scrap paper that I can, and I thought this was a super cute addition to the front of the card. And as you'll notice, this white circle is actually the cutout from my card backing. So that is what came out of here. So it does have a score line along the back, but I've never folded it and you can't see it from the front. So again, I'm just saving paper scraps that otherwise wouldn't be used. So this piece I'm actually going to mount onto a piece of glittered cardstock because I thought that was super fun and festive and very party-like, in my mind at least. So I'm going to set those aside. And I'm going to use a string now for my middle spinner. I pulled a couple strings out so that you could kind of see what they would look like. I have a fishing line now, and I did have a baker's twine. The baker's twine is a lot more apparent, so if you wanted to, or you weren't as concerned about it being hidden or as conspicuous, you could use a baker's twine. I did opt to use a fishing line here because I wanted the string a little bit more hidden. So I'm taking the first side of my spinner card and applying a pretty generous layer of glue onto that, and just making sure that I get glue right to the edges so that the other piece will stick down to it pretty well. And I'm grabbing just some cheap washi tape here and actually taping my fishing line down to the table. This will help just because it curls a lot and I want to be able to keep it straight. Also, I keep losing it because I can't see it. So I'm lining up my base of the spinner portion pretty well center onto the fishing line, and I'm running it back and forth just to get that fishing line covered in glue. Then I'm taking the other half of my piñata and sticking that down nice and tight right on top of the other one, lining it up as best I can. And I'm taking a little fake plant here and just setting it on top to add a little bit of weight while I peel off the tape. And now, as you can see, we have a double-sided piñata spinner. If you found at this point that your spinner wasn't quite even in the middle, or the string wasn't in the middle of your spinner, you could alter this with the tacky glue because it is still wet. But I'm going to set that aside and work on the rest of my card base right now. So I have this, I believe, 3.5 inch wide rectangle cut out of a patterned cardstock. This was kind of like sprinkle confetti pattern. And this is going to act as a backdrop for where my spinner is located. This step isn't necessary, but because the interior of my card is not colored and it's actually a different shade of white from the inside matte of the card, I am adding this little piece. I also think it adds a little bit of fun to the inside of the card. I thought the confetti pattern was very fitting for the piñata card theme. So I've just added some double-sided tape to one side of this folded rectangle here, and that's just going to allow me to add this piece in right at the fold the card over, and push it down nice and tight so that I make sure that fold gets right in where the fold of the card base is, so that I don't have any gapping in between that. Once that first side is stuck down, I'm going to, again, grab my double-sided tape and stick the other side down, doing the exact same thing, putting double-sided tape on all 4 edges of it. I want to make sure this is stuck down really, really well because it's going to be on the inner layer of the card. There's nothing else holding it down, and it's going to be folded a whole bunch, and you just really want to make sure that that piece stays in place. And again, folding the card base over it, using my scoring tool, to push that down and really make sure that it's adhered really, really well. And there you go. It kind of looks strange because I don't have the other piece on, but this is what you want. You want the middle of your card to have that pattern on it. You could cover the whole inside, but I think that's a waste of paper just because you only need that little section. So next I'm going to take the inner fold of my card and align my spinner portion sort of in the middle and apply some glue right on the fold of the card in the very center. And this is what's going to hold down my fishing line for the most part. So I'm adding that down, and then again, I'm taking in my cheap washi tape that's in a pretty opaque pattern so that you can't see it through the paper, and then pulling my fishing line tight and grabbing another little piece of washi tape and taping that section down. You want this string to be really, really, really taut. You want there to be a lot of tension on it, which will allow you to keep the spin to it. And I find just gluing down the fishing line doesn't get me a taut enough string. So I like adding the glue for some stability and the washi tape over top, which allows it to have some hold until the glue dries. And now I'm flipping it over. I'm going to move it around just to make sure everything is centered. Make sure that my Unicorn Piñata is centered within the circle, that the string is centered within the unicorn, and that it's not impeded by any of the edges of the frame. And then I cut off the excess of the fishing line because I don't want that shown, and I'm adding a few more pieces of washi tape just along the edges to really make sure that that fishing line is not going anywhere. So I'm going to next just move on to the front of my card while I give that fishing line and washi tape and glue a minute to sit and make sure that it's really adhered. The last thing that you want is to give somebody a spinner card that they open and it falls apart on them. So I just want to make sure that that's all stuck down really, really well before I continue fussing with that. So I'm taking that piece of silver glitter cardstock and just adding some double-sided tape to the back of it, peeling off the backing, and I'm going to stick that on relatively center on the front of the card base. Again, totally an optional element to the card, but I really like adding some dimension onto the front. So got it not quite centered, so I'm going to peel it off and try again. Which is kind of nice sometimes if you haven't stuck it all the way down that you can pick it up and move it around a little bit. So there we go. There is my glitter backing. And I'm going to add some foam squares to the back of this piñata element for the front of the card, just because I wanted to add a little bit more dimension and 3D of an element to it. So again, some foam squares to the back of that. And stick that I'm not doing it right in the center of the card. I'm kind of doing it in the upper half of the card, a little bit off center. And then I cut this letter, or this word, party, out of black cardstock. I cut 2 layers of it and stacked them on top of each other to give it a little bit more rigidity. This font I do not have a commercial license for, so this is not included within the SVG file pack, but you could use any font you have already loaded in your cutting machine software or that you have access to through programs such as Cricut Access. So this is how the front of the card looks, and now I'm going to move back into the inside of the card. So the way that this card is going to assemble is that middle section, those middle 2 sections of the fold are not actually going to be attached to anything. They're going to be freestanding, I guess. So I'm going to add double-sided tape to that first rectangular section of this inner piece. And make sure you don't go over that fold line. You just want to make sure you go right up to the fold line, but not over it. And at the same time, I'm actually going to add the double-sided tape to the other section. So you can see there's 4 sections. The middle 2 I have not touched with the double-sided tape. If you were to add double-sided tape to this, those would fold and stick together and you wouldn't quite have the same effect. Peeling the backing off of these. And as you can see, I'm only peeling off one side at a time, and this is going to make attaching it to the inside of the card much, much easier. So I'm going to take those two corners and line it up against the very outer edge of the back of my greeting card base. And then you can see again, that's why that middle section is not attached to anything, because you want it to be a kind of a pop out element. There you go. So it's going to pop outwards. So again, you're going to want to make sure that you're placing the double-sided tape on the correct side. You want that corner fold in the middle to pop outwards rather than inwards. And now I'm going to fold it onto itself and peel the double-sided tape off, and then essentially just close the card over it and push down so that everything is sealed and glued together. Use my scoring tool just to make sure it's really well sealed. And that's it. This is how the card looks all finished. And I'm just going to wind up my little piñata here so you can get the full effect of how it looks. I love this card. I think it's so, so cute. You can wind up the piñata, fold the card over, place it into an envelope, and then the second somebody gets it and opens it up, they get a cute little surprise. So here is a close-up of the outside, and then your recipient opens it and it spins like crazy. The more you twist that, the more it's going to spin. The one thing I will mention is that when you close the card, if you have the head of the piñata facing towards the opening of the card, there might be a little peek out of it. So I always like to have it facing towards the inner corner of the card, but either way, it still looks so cute. I love the effect of the spinner card. Jennifer Maguire is a genius when it comes to card design. So again, all credit for the spinner card portion of this goes to Jennifer Maguire. All other elements of this card for the piñata and the spinner portion will be included in my Etsy store for purchase as a downloadable file. And if you decide to make this card, I would absolutely love to see what you come up with and your creation. So please tag me with @thecreativecochrane on your Instagram posts. Thank you so much for being here and supporting my little channel. If you'd like to be up to date on all of the tutorials that I release, hit that subscribe button. And if you'd like to see another video right now, there should be one linked right in the top right-hand corner there. Thanks again and have a great day.